Hey everyone, welcome to another live stream. Here to take your questions. Going to really just focus on Q&A this evening and help you out with any questions based on assessments or anything that you are doing in class at the moment. So thank you for joining, and please ask away anything that you're not sure about, how to approach a particular assessment, an essay question, crafting texts, whatever it might be. Now is your opportunity to ask, and happy to give you feedback and some pointers on how you can prepare for your assessments. So let me know if you have any questions, and I will be happy to answer those. So throw your questions in the chat if you have a specific question. Have you been given assessments? Let me know what you are looking at in class this term. That'll be a good starting point for us. So throw up some texts or the names of the unit of study that you're looking at in the chat, and I can definitely give you some guidance on how to approach those different areas. Yes, so we got Rohan, good to see you again with the vintage all caps for each letter. Are we going to do adapting for stimulus material? Yes, so it's a good time to look at some examples for how to actually adapt a creative piece of writing to a stimulus prompt. So in terms of, what was your experience with drafting, Rohan? What actually happened? You said you've bombed the drafting, totally bombed my drafting session today. So give me a bit more context, and do you want to just put the prompt in the question as well? Add your specific prompt there so we can work off that. And basically what we want to do is figure out how you can make links between certain ideas or premises that you have in your drafts and a new stimulus that you are given. So how do you think creatively about tying those two things together? How do you tie together a stimulus that you haven't seen before and an existing draft piece that you are wanting to use to some extent? So what would be helpful, Rohan, is just put in the chat an example of ideally a written stimulus, so a bit of a prompt with a title, and just give me a line that kind of summarizes what your piece is about, and then we can explore some connections between those two things. So add a bit of context on those, and we can start talking about that. Just going to set up a document for you as well, so we can actually break this down together. So Rohan, again, let me know in the chat if you have a specific title. Here we go. The playbook, source 1. Play is not a luxury, but an opportunity. Source 2, image of a hand towards the moon. Source 3. Okay, but now you need to provide me your draft idea, because if we're using that as the prompt or as the stimulus, we now need to also know what you're working with to begin with, right? I'm just going to put in a document here, these different sources, and Rohan's going to tell me what he wanted to focus on in his original piece, and we're going to talk about how you could apply these stimuli. So this is for craft of writing or framework of ideas for your creating text pieces. A really important skill is how do you adapt to an unseen question or stimulus. So that is what we're going to look at here. Appreciate you providing the examples, Rohan. I'm just adding these into the doc. We'll share this in a second. Okay, just put in your original idea. Okay, so an Indian girl as initially struggles to find a cultural connection through learning Hindi, but she does find it because it, connects her with her father. And yes, you did, but just this is for the purpose of the live stream to help everyone else out. Got to give them some context as well, right? So let me share the doc with everyone. We're looking at the craft of writing piece here, or the framework of ideas for creating texts. How do you adapt an original piece, draft piece, to a new stimulus? Let's have a look at this breakdown. Let me get the right view here. Okay, just going to get rid of this. There we go. Okay, so stimulus adaptation for crafting texts. The title here is the playbook. We've got 3 sources to pick from, but we can consider each one. The original idea of the draft is an Indian girl struggling to find a cultural connection through learning Hindi, but she does find it and kind of persists, I assume, because it kind of connects her with her father. It might be that by persisting, she's able to connect with her father, and that in fact creates the cultural connection. So whichever angle, we can kind of assume it's one of those. Now, if that was the original idea of your draft, then the question is, if I have to title my piece the playbook, how can I interpret that title? How can I interpret this title to suit with this idea? And we need to think really flexibly about it. So I'm just going to do all the notes in dot points for each of these parts. So if I think of the playbook, right? And I think we think about play. What are we playing with here? We're playing with language. This is where my mind goes. We're playing with language. So you need to interpret these concepts, titles, sources in a way that is convenient to your piece. Because you're learning Hindi, that's kind of the relevant play thing, right? You're playing with language, learning a language, and that's going to connect you to culture. Okay? So what is the playbook, though? I mean, the playbook could easily just be something you integrate here. Here's actually a unique take. So at first, it feels like the playbook is, a textbook on, how to speak Hindi or something like that, right? It's some kind of book that is teaching her the language, right? Is a kind of textbook on learning Hindi, right? It feels like the playbook is that, right? In the end, this is where you get creative with it. In the end, it turns out that, and this is your whole play on the title of the playbook. She thinks that, okay, I need to learn Hindi. This is my playbook. This is how I can connect. It turns out that the true playbook, right, was kind of connecting with her father to learn Hindi because that ultimately gave her the fulfillment of both. So there's a bit of an epiphany moment where she realizes the playbook wasn't an actual book, it was actually the connection with her father, which she was overlooking at first, because that ultimately gives her, a much deeper fulfillment and helps her learn the language and gives her the cultural connection she was looking for. So it turns out that the cultural connection wasn't to be found in the Hindi textbook itself. It was actually to be found in the connection with her father that she would develop by seeking his guidance to learn the language. And that was the most fulfilling thing. So that's a nice play on what the true playbook is. So you have to be flexible with how you interpret that. Okay, so I'll just give you my take on it first, Rohan, and then kind of address any comments or questions you have. But just, I'm just giving you my thoughts on it, right? So that you can think more broadly about different options that you could use, okay? Just because you said, you wanted a bit of guidance on that. I'll come back to what you did do, and we can talk about whether that could work or not. But here's my kind of initial take on it. So that's how we can deal with the title. And then in terms of having these sources, like play is not a luxury, but an opportunity. That one's simple. Can you see it? It's an opportunity to connect with both her father and her culture, her cultural heritage. Right? Learning Hindi is an opportunity to connect with both her father and her culture. But yeah, it's not a luxury. It's not a luxury because it requires effort and openness. And that it seems like you're exploring that in yours anyway. So that's a nice fit. An image of a hand towards the moon, right? So let me see if I can just find the example here. Let's see. Okay, so some copyright things there, Getty Images, thank you very much. So image of a hand towards the moon, here's an example of that. Now, this is where you need to have a symbolic take of this, right? And you don't necessarily want to actually write about someone reaching out to the moon, although maybe your character physically does do that at some point. But your protagonist is reaching out. The moon represents something external. Your protagonist is reaching out, craving a cultural connection with her kind of Indian heritage, which feels like another planet, right? It feels like another planet. It's foreign. It's alien, so to speak, you see? Which feels alien. And I'm going to put that in kind of speech marks there, because alien in the sense that it's outer space, she's so disconnected. So the image comes to represent that craving, that yearning for a connection. So again, I think that works pretty well as well, right? Now, when you actually go through your piece, try and use a lot of the imagery that you see here. Like literally use similes. Similes are always a great tool when you're talking about connections to stimuli, because you need to make it very clear how you're using the stimulus, right? So talk about the celestial imagery here. Maybe this equals the sense of fulfillment or wonder when she is finally able to connect, right? It felt like I was reaching out. Now, that could be a moon or a planet. Like if it doesn't actually say it's a moon, then it doesn't need to be a moon. It could just be a planet, right? I was reaching out towards a foreign planet, but it was one that I could never touch, right? It's one that I could never touch. Like, this is how she feels at the start. This is how you establish the disconnect, and then you always kind of build on top of that. You never want to just use like one simile and then move back to what you were going to say. Establish the initial disconnect. You then want to like layer on top of that, right? I was reaching out towards a foreign planet. At times I felt lost. I felt so lost. I felt like I was floating in space, right? At times I felt like I was just a small speck floating in space, caught between the past and the present, right? Because she's like maybe second gen or something, Australian. So you need to kind of layer on top the imagery and the links to the stimulus so that it's actually substantial. I always talk about the rule of threes. So try to have at least 3 sentences in a row, more or less, every time you connect directly to the stimulus or the prompt. Now, that's just a rule of thumb. You should actually be doing it a lot more, but it's like practice doing it at least 3 times in a row so that you're not just doing these superficial connections back to the stimulus. Celestial imagery. I'm saying celestial imagery, Rahan, because you can see stars in the image and the moon, and it's a planetary thing. So that's why I'm saying that. I wouldn't use it necessarily for any stimulus, but you could, of course, have celestial imagery in any piece. I'm just showing you how you could connect your piece to the different sources here. Okay, and then the final one you had is play if it's like a directive to play if found in the unexpected. Well, how is she caught up in the unexpected? She's caught up. Well, I mean, there's a couple ways you could take it, right? She wants to learn Hindi, but is struggling. Okay, that's the struggle. Okay, how do I get out of this? I didn't expect it. She didn't expect it. Now we're connecting directly to be so hard. So play, right? So make it meaningful. Find a different way to learn it. Okay, connect. She connects with her father by doing something fun. She connects with her father by doing something fun that links to, Hindi or just the background. And then she finds that by doing that, she's able to, and that unlocks her ability to connect with the culture. And maybe she doesn't end up learning Hindi in this particular scenario, but she connects with the culture because that was what she wanted in the end. So it's like, turns out she just had to have this kind of open, curious spirit and a kind of an openness to connecting with her father and not ruling anything out, and then kind of finding herself in this form of play, in the sense that, maybe they're playing a game, like an old Indian game or something, or he's telling her stories, stories, games, whatever it is, that actually is the unlock for her. So if I had to pick between the 3, I feel like the first 2 are probably easier for you. The last one's doable, but I think you can do any source for any piece, as I've just shown you. Like, just unpacked all 3, unpack the title. The first thing is going through that title and making sure you get this overall concept of, a playbook. The playbook might be a literal book here. It could be a literal book, but the point is that she's ultimately she discovers that the true playbook is to actually think outside the box and talk to her dad about his experiences or engage in some kind of other ritual, and that will connect her to the culture. So the playbook was what she thought it was. It wasn't some literal textbook. And you can use all these different types of literal playbooks. It might be an app on a phone or something, right? Or a diary or something like that. And she's finding that that's not effective, but actually engaging with, her father, that's going to be the unlock. So it's the same theme across all of them, and that's what we want. So you could use your piece for any of these sources now, as I have just demonstrated. So I hope that helps. Let me know if you have any questions. Just keeping on the topic here, I'll see if you have any specific feedback there, Rohan. But Rohan, does that make sense? Like, are you still confused at all about how you could use any of these elements? Or is it pretty clear how you could interpret these in a way that suits your piece? Because I've unpacked each one in accordance with your draft. Yeah, so your teacher said the title should be implemented throughout the entire piece. Sure, so it's a motif. So it's a playbook. The playbook is a motif, okay? The playbook is a motif, really powerful thing. It recurs throughout. When you say, how do I do that? You just have the character reflecting on it. Like, I thought this must be the playbook. Excuse me. Excuse me. So the playbook is a motif. It recurs throughout. In terms of how to use it, protagonist often reflects on what the right playbook is. I've tried everything. I've tried studying it. I've tried Duolingo. I've tried everything. Duolingo. My mother's kind of ancient textbooks on Hindi grammar or something, right? Like I can't figure out, but I can't work out whether I've got the right playbook. Right? So you actually explicitly say it, but you're connecting it to all of the different things that she's trying. And then at the end, she realizes that the ultimate playbook was connecting with her father. That's what we're saying. So you can be explicit about it, but you should also use terms that are to do with the playbook so you're not getting repetitive. So yes, you want to say playbook, but what comes in a playbook? Like typically, you could talk about the key ingredients to the playbook, or when they say the playbook, they're talking about a step-by-step, right? I'm trying all these different steps, maneuvers, When you talk about a playbook, you're talking about strategy. So all of these things are coming to mind. That's what a playbook is. It's like a manual. So I would basically brainstorm a few of these terms and try and use those alongside the actual word playbook, so that you're not getting repetitive and just saying playbook, playbook, playbook. You're thinking, what's the right strategy? Maybe I need to make a different maneuver. I had to think back to the manual. So there's this metaphorical playbook that's always being talked about, but you still need to use synonyms as well to avoid too much repetition. Okay, so we use synonyms like that. So Rahan says the title and image seem pretty confusing. How do you mean? So the title is the playbook. The image is the reaching out to connect with that what feels like a very alien culture. Make sense? So hand reaching out, the moon or the other planet represents her Indian heritage that she craves a connection to, and she's trying to use the right playbook so that she can reach that planet. She can reach that other kind of solar system or whatever it might be, however you want to think about metaphorically in her Indian heritage. But she's reaching for that foreign culture, which is represented by that moon or other planet. And the playbook is the way she's going to get there. It's the rocket ship. You can actually start to merge the metaphors there, funnily enough. because you want to use imagery to do with space. So you say, I needed to find the right playbook. I needed to find a rocket ship that was going to launch me back, that was going to take me back or send me back to my parents' heritage or to my Indian heritage. So you can actually merge this idea of a playbook being, how do I get there? How do I reach that planet that I'm trying to find a connection to? You can merge that idea with some metaphors about space travel, rocket ships, shooting stars and things like that. She's trying to use the right playbook to get to that planet. Does that make sense? Far-reached is a better word. Like, I'm wondering where I could possibly adapt this to. Not sure exactly what you mean there, Rahan. Just clarify that. I use the playbook as a form. Would that be okay? Like, you wrote your whole piece as a playbook. Is that what you mean? Like, instead of using the concept of the playbook, what you actually wrote was a playbook. Yes, you could do that. You could, that's very creative, and interpreting it as the form is something you can do. So you can even within the playbook refer to the playbook. Like, the playbook is like the step-by-step. Step one, I'm trying to learn Hindi via this book or this app or something, whatever you had in your original piece, right? Step one of the playbook wasn't so successful. Step two, so you can actually structure the piece like a playbook. I really like that. It's very creative. And you can use the playbook, or you can write your piece as a playbook. But again, only do it if you are confident in doing that. You don't have to do it. So it's the form itself. But very, very clever strategy. Write your actual piece as a step-by-step playbook. But there's a bit of irony, of course, in that, because a lot of the initial steps turn out not to be as useful as the later step, right? So yeah, that's cool. That's a good strategy there. Anadi, hopefully I'm saying your name correctly. I'm coming to your question. I just wanted to wrap up on this whole stimulus breakdown. So for anyone who's just tuning in, you can watch it back, just breaking down all of these different kind of sources, quotes, showing you how you can link an original idea or a draft idea to all of these different types of stimuli, so that you can always use, kind of the key concepts and probably a lot of the draft that you were intending to use in the exam. So Rahan, my teacher loved my original piece, but it fit only to that prompt, so I can't see where I could change my piece to these sources. Rahan, you might need to watch the video back, or let me know what's not connecting there. So you've literally got the breakdown. Here are all the breakdowns of how you can actually do it. So watch the live stream back, Rahan, because I feel like I've broken down every single source here, so that it's very simple how you could link to any of these sources. You could retain almost exactly what you have. Nothing's that different about the breakdowns. It's just the emphasis on the new terms, like play if found in the unexpected. It's a very general one that you could basically apply to anything. You just suddenly emphasize the unexpected in your piece. The unexpected is, I didn't expect to connect with my culture, through, kind of developing a stronger connection with my father. I thought that this was going to happen. Like, you already had her trying to learn Hindi. What was unexpected is that it was through her father. So that one's clear. We've been through that a lot, and yeah, play is an opportunity. It's the same thing. So source one, source three, the same. Hopefully that is clear enough for you. But yeah, watch the live stream back and let me know very specifically if any of the points don't make sense, because just respond to what I've said about them, because that is how you do it. So keep the original piece, but chuck on those metaphors and similes. Yeah, exactly. That's what we're talking about. I thought that's what you wanted. So I thought you wanted to know how to adapt your draft, your original piece, to those different sources. So everything I just explained was based on your original original idea of the draft. That's what you had. So you can keep your piece, but you need to throughout weave in all of these connections to the sources and make it really explicit, really clear, using synonyms for the playbook, actually speaking about a playbook, but you're still overall exploring the exact same piece, because there's no need to sacrifice all of it. I've just proved that you don't need to get rid of your original piece. All you need to do is have the right perspective and then thread the language throughout. And you need to do it a lot. But if you have that macro perspective of how you can use these different stimuli, like I've explained, I've gone through some examples of how you can do it. It felt like I was reaching out towards a foreign planet or towards another planet. It felt alien, right? Now that's you speaking directly to the image if you write like that, but you're relating it back to your original piece all the same. So you don't actually need to construct an entirely new piece, because I thought the idea, or at least what you were asking, was how can I still use my original piece or idea, but link it to these different sources? So that's kind of what I've broken down. But yes, if that's the aha moment there, then yes, you use metaphors, similes to do that. That's right. But you could also use it, the form itself, like the playbook. That was a clever idea, but you don't need to do that. All right, I'm going to move on to Anadi's questions. Hope that's helping with the craft of writing, or creative writing adaptation. And thanks, Rohan, for offering those up as examples for everyone to have a look at. So Nadi says, what is the best way, and let me get this right. What is the best way to learn different perspectives of a text and its ideas from books like The Handmaid's Tale? What is the best way to learn unique, different perspectives of a text and its ideas from books like The Handmaid's Tale? I mean, best way to learn unique or different perspectives on a text is to do research, right? So obviously you're going to learn about certain ideas in class. So that's one source. Then I would do a huge kind of Google search. I would look up articles. What's this about? I read a ton of summaries on a text like Handmaid's Tale. I would look at, JSTOR we looked at, I think, in last week's live stream, or maybe it was maybe it was 2 live streams ago. We looked at an actual example of going through Google Scholar. If you type in Google Scholar and put in Handmaid's Tale and then read what people have written about it, that's the best way to absorb different perspectives. But even things like ChatGPT, honestly, as an introductory or an entry point, are incredibly helpful for giving you these different perspectives. It's ultimately going to come down to your execution and how you word things, and you don't need to be super original or unique in terms of the overall ideas, but you do need to express those ideas with sophistication and offer some nuance, some really specific points that a lot of students will gloss over. So it's all about depth and really going into detail into your points. But it's not about being completely original, but you definitely need to do your research and look up extra sources of material like Jeddle. Jeddle actually compiles a lot of those things together within the analysis. But doing further read-ins is like an essential ingredient for that mega success at the top. So if you want to get like full marks, you need to do lots of outside research, develop your vocabulary, but also expose yourself to different perspectives. But let me see here. If we think about, let me go back to this one, kind of the key things I would do. Let me just go here. Let's go to Google Scholar. So I'm on Google Scholar here, okay? And I'm also going to, I should probably also go to GPT as well. So GPT, here's the starting point, okay? So I'm studying The Handmaid's Tale. Provide the 5, well, let's actually do it this way, because the prompt's important, right? provide the 3 most popular perspectives on what the novel is about, then list 3 perspectives that are more nuanced, but also have validity. Okay, so I've gone on to GPT, I've put in this prompt. You want different perspectives, so I'm going to use AI, I'm going to use Google to actually get an overall understanding of these perspectives, right? And then I'm going to research these further. So this is the platform that you work off to develop your understanding, okay? You can go deeper and deeper by continuing to prompt GPT and Google, but this is a tool that you can really use to your advantage. You still need to validate a lot of what it says. I wouldn't use this for specific quotes or anything like that, but I would use it to get an overall understanding of the different perspectives that are out there, right? Okay, it's a warning about patriarchy. What does that mean? You can ask it further if you want a more simplified kind of explanation of what that even means, like kind of male-centric value system that oppresses women. The novel is often read as a feminist dystopia. There's some good language that comes out from this. And yes, you still need to cross-check it with other articles on Google and do your own research and obviously ask your teacher about things as well. But this is just a great starting point to expose yourself to some different perspectives. Because all of these, if I look at the most popular perspectives, okay, it's a warning about patriarchy. It's a critique of authoritarianism, right? This is slightly different, actually. Outward critiques the fusion of religion and state power. Okay, that's different. And then this one says a reflection on women's rights. Women's rights and patriarchy are going to be similar. The authoritarian point is slightly broader, which I like. So you can have a look at that, but then you can have a look at this, more nuanced perspectives. It's a story about language and narrative control. Outward explores how language shapes perception and power. Great, that wasn't immediately obvious. I knew it was about patriarchy, but now it's actually about language. So interesting. A meditation on female complicity, internalized oppression. Oh, what does that mean? Internalized oppression. Okay, simplify what you mean by, for a 12-year-old. I always put for a 12-year-old, right? You want very simple explanations. Internalized oppression means that sometimes when people are treated unfairly, they start to believe that how they were being treated was justified, right? Even if they hurt themselves or others. So, if someone constantly says, you're dumb, you're dumb, you're dumb, you start to believe that you're dumb, even if you're not. So, or you're not worthy, or, you deserve not to have as much power. So that's kind of what it's getting at here. Then it provides some generic examples. Be very careful with ChatGPT examples because they can chuck in different character names and things like that. So you've always got to go back to the source text. You've got to go back to your actual novel, hard copy or digital copy, whatever it might be, to verify any plot details and character details. But certainly when you get a summary of concepts and perspectives, great starting point. Yeah, so this is super important. Just in the comments here, my ChatGPT usually makes up lots of evidence and quotes. Do not use ChatGPT for quotes because it often does get them wrong. You have to go back to the source text. You have to go back to your actual novel and find it and validate it and do other searches. So never just work off that. You will be caught out. Seen heaps of students get caught out with that. Is there any way to counter this without having to buy the GPT Plus? Yeah, again, just don't trust GPT for quotes, at least at this point in time, even GPT Plus. I don't trust it for that. It's great for overall perspectives. It's great for brainstorming. It's great for getting a sense of different ideas that are out there. But it's still limited and it's guided by what you put in. So you've got to know how to deliver good prompts here. You've got to know how to do good prompts because the answers are only as good as the prompts that you give it. Make sure you do follow-up questions. The value of GPT is in follow-up questions. What do you mean by that? What are some other perspectives on that? What are some contextual links to that? Okay, so let's have a look at this. If you're looking at Handmaid's Tale, let's go in relation to this particular perspective. List 3 specific contextual influences on the novel. So now we've got the idea. What are the specific contextual inspirations? Okay, the rise of the religious right. So groups like the moral majority. Okay, I would see that, and then I would Google search that. I don't just keep. I ask GPT further, but I always cross-check all of these specific references. And again, I don't rely on it for quotes or examples, or even characters. Groups like the moral majority gain political power and push for traditional gender roles. Okay, so the fact that it said moral majority. Tell me more about the moral majority. And then you start to get more information. Did that directly influence Atwood? Directly influenced Atwood. So now you have this reference to the moral majority, which is a cool term. Atwood's own words. Okay, I'm going to be very careful about this. I'm not going to trust that they are her own words, but it's directing me to things to look up on Google at least and find some other sources. In a 1987 interview, she said, "I made a rule I would not include anything that not already happened. The deep foundation of the US is not liberal democracy, but biblical." Okay. So we can do further research on this, but the point is I'm getting some good material through this to then validate on other sources like the original text. So that's how I use GPT. I use it as a kind of initial platform to get ideas and then go and cross-check with other sources. But if you really want to get into the nuance and the scholarly articles, you go to Google Scholar or JSTOR, and what you'll do is you'll then search, Handmaid's Tale. I think we saw something back on, feminist dystopia. Okay, that sounds interesting. We're putting good terms like that and then see what has been written about it. Well, look at that. 26 citations, always good if it's been cited by a lot of people, means that it's probably pretty good. This one also 165, 37, etc. But look at this, breaking silences in feminist dystopias. And then you can have a look, Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale. Okay, you can have a look at when it was written as well. But then the idea is you jump onto there, let it load, and then that is going to give you some great material, hopefully, that you can look at and draw inspiration from. So it talks about the Handmaid's Tale there. We can try, here we go. The handmaid in Atwood's narrative is similarly objectified and silenced. The fundamentalist totalitarian regime of Gilead has subjugated women, restricting them to limited roles of servitude. Limited roles of servitude. Nice phrasing, nice expressions. Use that, write it down, work it into your own piece. Don't copy paste whole things, but grab expressions like that and make it your own. Okay, that's how you're going to develop your vocab and have a higher level of sophistication. Early in the book, the narrator recalls women's talk, which he used to despise, but now longs for. Okay, not everything's going to be relevant, but you might find just some really good pieces of analysis or references that are useful. So you just work through these articles. The Handmaid's Tale suggests an even less optimistic future. The handmaid's voice is replaced by a different yet familiar voice, that of the social scientists. Okay, so it has lots of stuff in there that you can work in, okay? What we could also do is, we saw that thing about the moral majority. We can then put that in there and see if that's been written about. So Handmaid's Tale, not coming up too much here. The moral majority, Atwood. I'm literally just demonstrating how I would do research here to grab some more sophisticated materials. Okay, why The Handmaid's Tale is so relevant today. I used to love and still do, to be honest. It was more just as a student, if I wanted to level up and set myself apart from other students, not in a competitive sense, but really lift my level. I would just read these kind of articles all the time. And then I would have a document where I kind of took the best parts of each one and just collected them, right? So you'll find a lot of great language in these kind of articles. This one's more of a news one. That's why I like Google Scholar, because they're published articles. They're usually at a higher level and more relevant for you. But I certainly like reading through these kind of things as well. Okay, like things like speculative fiction, they're good terms to look further into, so that you can actually incorporate those kind of things in your piece. Here's that moral majority element. We could do a search there. Okay, the book mirrored the United States' embrace of conservatism, as evidenced by the election of Ronald Reagan, as well as the increasing power of the Christian right and its powerful lobbying organizations, moral majority, etc. Wow, okay, that's a really good piece of context. The novel mirrored the United States' embrace of conservatism, and then you've got moral majority as an example. So this idea of it mirroring the kind of conservative bent of the time or inclination of the time, okay, now you're getting into some really good details that you can include in your essay to stand out, okay? So hopefully that helps. That's how I would go through my research. I'd be making notes of all of those relevant pieces, grouping them by themes and context, and that's how you're going to elevate your level. How can you prevent and handle freezing up during exams, especially for English in the 3-hour exam when your mind goes blank, regardless of the amount of study I've done? Yeah, look, great question. How can you prevent freezing up? I mean, preparation is the main answer. Of course, there's, being over-prepared, I suppose, but I would way rather be over-prepared than under-prepared. You could be over-prepared so much that, you're obsessing about it and you get all panicky and suddenly you can't think straight. Sure, that can happen. But I would way rather be over-prepared and have done lots of practice. The best thing you can do is have already put yourself in that scenario. So literally put in 3 hours on the clock well in advance of the exam and saying, hey, I'm going to force myself right now, no distractions, to do this so that I desensitize myself to this exam. You desensitize by doing something over and over again so that when you get into the exam, it's nothing. You just picture yourself, hey, I'm back at my desk. I'm doing another 3-hour paper. It's nothing, right? It basically has no effect on you because you've been there before, right? So the first thing is preparing by actually putting yourself in the scenario of an exam, timed, under timed conditions. That's why teachers always say practice under timed conditions, and have prepared well. So know all your materials really well. You're going to be more anxious if you know less. If you feel like you know everything and you've done everything and you've practiced every type of question and you know how to handle every scenario, and you've placed yourself in timed conditions and know that you can write everything on time, that you haven't got things that are too long and you're going to run out of time and then create unnecessary stress in the exam. If you know that, why would you freak out? Yeah, sure, the stakes are higher now that you're in an actual exam, but you've prepared for every scenario, and you've even prepared for scenarios where you're not prepared. So you've thrown yourself questions that you haven't seen before and forced yourself to respond. So you've become desensitized to being presented with new questions or things that might throw you off. So preparation early, doing things in timed conditions, but most importantly for me, knowing all your material really well, having already timed out everything and cut it down so you have time to spare is going to be the key strategy there to avoid freezing up. You've got to be prepared for the unexpected. You've got to be prepared for questions that are going to throw you off a bit. That's why when you draft things, make sure that you cut them down so you have a buffer time in the exam to stop, breathe, process, and think. If every single essay you've prepared is going to take the maximum amount of time, then of course you're going to be stressed on the day because you don't have a second to spare. But for me, I would always have about 8 minutes per section to spare, maybe 8 to 10 minutes. If say it was 40 minutes, I could do it in 30, and I'd practice that and I knew it really well. I had 10 minutes to kind of sit there. Oh, that's a tough question. Okay, I don't need to stress out. I can think about it. What's one thing I can think about? What's one way that I can respond to this question? And I give myself, 30 seconds. Okay, I'm going to start working that into the intro, and then I get into a groove. Getting into a groove is so important, but you've got to have that time buffer to allow yourself to start with something, one thing, one way of unpacking the question, so that you can get into that flow, and then you'll start thinking more clearly. So prepare early, prepare for different questions in exam scenario, and make sure that all your drafts that you prepare are much shorter than the time it would take to write them on the day, so that you have a buffer time that will reduce your anxiety and prevent you from freezing up. With the HSC timetable released, how would you suggest we prepare for trials and the HSC? Well, one step at a time. Prepare for trials first. As soon as you are 6 to 8 weeks out, you should create a schedule and you should work backwards from the timetable. So if your first exam is English, where do you want to be a day before that English exam? Where do you want to be 3 days before that English exam? Where do you want to be 1 week before that English exam? How much do you want to know? What do you want to have already achieved? Work backwards in your planning and write in all the milestones. Okay, 1 week out, I need to have memorized everything, if you're memorizing. Okay, great. Well, that means that I need to have finished my drafts, or I need to have finished drafting 2 to 3 weeks out. So I have time to memorize, right? I need to allow 2 weeks. You know yourself how much time you'll need to really familiarize. Okay, how many practice questions do I want to have done? I want to have done 5 practice questions for each module. Okay, that's going to take me this much time. I have this many days. You work backwards and figure out when you need to hit each thing. And then you do that for all your subjects and you create a study schedule. But 6 to 8 weeks, and start from 1 day before your first exam in your planning and figure it out, and minimize the amount of subjects you're focusing on each day. I typically would just focus on 2 subjects a day because there's a switching cost. Whenever you switch from one task to another, task switching costs you a lot of time and cognitive energy. Okay, because you have to then will yourself to start the next thing. So that's my advice on planning. Don't think about the HSC timetable just yet. Think about trials, and don't even think about trials yet. Think about your next assessment. Once you finish that next assessment, make sure you got that 6 to 8 weeks study plan before your first trial exam. All right, that is the bulk of questions. I'm going to wrap it up now. Rahan, kind of a general question there conceptually about complacency. I need more context for that one. Let's have a go with that next week. Jump on next week with a bit more context on that one for me. But otherwise, I hope that helps everyone. Thank you for tuning in. If you have submissions that you want feedback on, use the link below this live stream and you can submit a paragraph from one of your essay drafts or a craft of writing piece, stimulus adaptation, and I will go through those. I'll make sure next week I'm starting with some responses. We've got a lot of student responses to get through. So next Tuesday I'll be on. Make sure you check out Jeddle.com if you need more help with resources, analysis, examples. There's JeddAI as well. So go to Jeddle.com if you need more help with English resources or anything to do with English. See you next week. Otherwise, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed to Jeddle's YouTube channel, Instagram, TikTok. We're posting content all the time, which I hope is helpful for you. But otherwise, looking forward to seeing you all in a week's time or sooner if you're subscribed and checking out all the other content that is coming out. Good luck with your studies and enjoy the rest of your night.